Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Bibliomancy for Beginners. Today, we will be discussing On Writing by Stephen King. Do we need to do the reading of the back of the book for something such as this?
I mean, probably considering that the back of the book is like one paragraph, it won't kill anybody.
Okay. I don't have my copy handy, so...
Oh, I got it.
Gretchen, let's see if you're right. Will it kill someone?
Hopefully not. So this is my pick, and I'm really excited about it. As you can see, it is called On Writing by Stephen King. And it says, "Long live the King," hailed Entertainment Weekly upon publication of Stephen King's On Writing. Part memoir, part masterclass by one of the best-selling authors of all time, this superb volume is a revealing and practical view of the writer's craft, comprising the basic tools of the trade every writer must have. King's advice is grounded in his vivid memories from his childhood through his immersions as a writer, from his struggling early career to his widely reported near-fatal accident in 1999, and how the inextricable link between writing and living spurred his recovery. Brilliantly structured, friendly, and inspiring, On Writing will empower and entertain everyone who reads it. Fans, writers, and anyone who loves a great story well told.
Well done.
Wow.
Also, quick before we go on, does someone have something playing in the background?
That's John. That's what you hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't turn it down.
Yeah.
I think it was that.
My boyfriend is here for all of those watching now or later, and he's deaf, so his phone is up very high.
Tell Deaf Boy to put headphones in. Jesus Christ.
That's what they're made for.
My girlfriend's also really
They both said that's what headphones are made for.
Go make him sit in the kitchen or something. That's not like a gendered statement. I just figured it was probably furthest away from your bedroom.
No, it's just funny to think of just you being like, John, you're banished to the kitchen. Get in there.
Go, make me a souffle.
Taylor says you're banished from the kitchen. Go make him a sandwich.
I said a souffle, and for you.
Wow! Why did I come over and bring ice cream?
Okay, anyways, let's get back to this because...
Yeah. Well, Gretchen, you made that far meaner than it was.
We occasionally talk about books. Wait, that's a co-optional podcast.
There are mysterious men in the background of all of your cameras.
They came with the ice cream.
Yeah.
I didn't get what? Again, I didn't get ice cream. I didn't get a... Better not if I got a mysterious stranger. My roommate's gone to work. Guys, if you see anything, you need to tell me, okay?
Yeah, my boyfriend's also in the background, but he's sleepy, so he will probably just sleep. Say hi, Haro.
He did. He made noodle hands. All right.
Yes, so normally when we're doing this, I would say this is a book club, and we will be talking about the characters and events. But the characters and events are Stephen King's actual real-life life. So, Can you get spoiled on that? I mean, I guess. I did note in my review of this one that if you haven't read any of Stephen King's early novels, and by that I mean things written before 1999, maybe don't read this if you're afraid of spoils, because he does discuss certain events of those novels and what he did in his writing process surrounding them. It's not like super major, but some people
he does break down Carrie.
Yes, so spoiler alert, in case you're wondering who wrote Carrie.
Also, Misery, he does get into a little bit of details about if you didn't know.
Yeah, not the end for any of the other ones, though.
No.
Like The Stand and Misery, he goes into detail, but doesn't like give away the narrative. Still, it's like, guys, these books are like 40 years old at least.
Which is why I say, if you have not read them, note he talks about them.
Although how much we will talk about them is debatable.
Is that where we want to start, actually? Our prior experience with Stephen King?
It can be.
Because he's kind of like a weird figure in modern publishing, in that like everything he's ever written is a bestseller, and then there's still a lot of folk who kind of sneer But like,
I mean, I was saying this to Michaela when we were, because I was reading the book next to her.
Sure.
And when he said that he really gets judged for like writing trash, but it's the kind of trash that he likes to write, but like he's also super popular, and like that dichotomy, because I feel like a lot of writing books, they're either written by people that I've never heard of, and they're just like kind of editors or whatever, and that's one thing, or they're written by literary authors, and while there's nothing wrong with that, I loved hearing the perspective of someone who's like, you know what, I am not a literary genius, you know, these are the bare bones, this is what makes my, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't like Stephen King. I'd have never read a single one of his books because I'm not into scary things, and I understand that's not all that he does, but it's...
You should probably have read at least one to say you don't like Stephen King, but I accept your point.
I don't like the premise of his novels as far as any of the ones that I have ever picked up. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm. That's because most of his, like, big bestsellers are his horror books.
My point in that was that, like, even though
the Gunslingers,
even though I don't like
the Dark
him,
Tower series,
like the premise of them, like I respected this book, and I loved this book, and I love what he had to say. So, as someone who yes has ever read them but never been interested in Stephen King as a writer, I very much enjoyed this book.
He does kind of draw a comparison indirectly between himself and J.K. Rowling. They write fun books. Like, he's like, say what you will about her using adverbs or anything, but they are fun, though. And he's like hugely appreciative. The same thing with Stephen King. Like, he will never be hailed as like the literary fiction's just savior or anything, but his books are hella entertaining for a lot of people.
And honestly, I think that's more important to learn about how to write than like a good sentence. You know what I mean? Like, how do you
engage people?
Yeah.
He has personality, and that's good.
He's got personality to spare.
Okay, so
Michaela, what have you read?
What have I read?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, if you want to talk about that.
Do we want manifesto? So I was first introduced to Stephen King when I was in high school. My dad was reading 4 Past Midnight, which is a collection of his short stories.
In a napkin?
Mm-hmm.
Chatting is happening, and I cannot speak while the chatting is happening.
Sorry, I spilled ice cream.
Wow. So yeah, my dad was reading 4 Past Midnight, which is one of his collections of short stories. Okay. So I picked it up when he was done and read that and really loved it. I then was like, oh, this guy wrote a lot of the movies that I have seen and really liked. So then I picked up things like Carrie and The Shining and, you know, the stuff of his that is far more known in the public in that way, or at least for a high school student.
The Shining probably bridges demographics.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's a fucking Kubrick film.
Even if he does hate it.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's the 3-part TV special for him then.
Yeah. Stand By Me. Also an amazing
film. Yeah.
So fucking good. So yeah, there was like
a ton of movies. Jesus.
Yeah, dude's not only prolific in the book industry, but has a lot of really great films made out of his really great books. So I read, and obviously anybody who knows me, if you've watched our channel for any amount of time, will know that I am a huge fan of horror. So I was perfectly drawn into that aspect of his writing. I read it in high school. I read a lot of like the big name things, the things that like people say is like, this is what you should read. Although I did not read The Stand, and him talking about it in here, I'm like, now I need to read The Stand. So that's the thing. I am literally currently, as we speak, like about a fifth of the way into 11/22/63. in college, on Taylor's recommendation, I started the Gunslinger, or the Dark Tower series, the first book being the Gunslinger. I have the second book, but haven't started it. I read the first chapter, I think, but I stopped there. I have 2 more of his short story collections to read, which I'm planning to do starting.
Gretchen, I think the audio's still filtering through from your end.
She just mutes herself. Yeah, so I have those. I have the sequel to The Shining, which I have Dr. Sleep.
Oh yeah, that fairly recent.
Yeah, it's one of his more recent books, and it's like 30 years or something after he published The Shining, like a ridiculous gap between these two. But before I read that one, I had wanted to reread The Shining, which I have yet to do. I have It that I would like to reread before going to see the movie in October, so I have like no time to do that. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Stephen King, and I have read a lot of his works across many genres. I'm still doing the thing. That's me.
I haven't read as much Stephen King as you, especially not across the greatest hits quite as well. I don't like horror. I don't do very well with it at all. However, I started with Pet Sematary.
Oh.
And that's like, that was, I think I was probably...
Wait, you didn't want to start with Cujo?
I think I was still in middle school when I read Pet Sematary.
Cujo is a little story about a cute little puppy. Why is that the wrong place to start?
And Pet Sematary is just about kitties and burbs.
Yeah. No, it was my freshman year of high school. That's when it was.
I was going to say, what adult was like, here, Taylor, read Pet Sematary. You're 12.
You know
That's
who it
fine.
was? You know who it was? It was a fucking librarian who said, yeah, read that one.
Oh, no. That's bad.
So I've enjoyed Stephen King a lot over the years. I've gone through his short stories a little more, just reading random collections off that. But while I haven't quite been able to handle his scary novels all too well, I did read and very much loved the entire Dark Tower series, which is a complete undertaking and just a wild shift for him. Like, it was really exciting for me because I always liked his world building a little bit more than like his character interactions, and that build was always a lot, really satisfying for me, a lot of fun. And then the horror stuff would happen and I'd be uncomfortable. But Dark Tower was a great way to see him get into a lot of different genres, including freaky stuff. But I've always been fond of the man and his son's work, Joe Hill, but we don't need to talk about that. But Michaela and I both like him a lot.
Well, I also like that, we all came to this book with, once again, like a whole spectrum of how to feel about Stephen King. Like someone who, like me, who's like, I haven't read a thing, and then Taylor, who's like in the middle, and then Michaela, who's like, everything that I can get my hands on within, like, human space of reading. And I think that I mean, granted, I can't quite speak for Taylor because I haven't talked to Taylor as much about this, but I know Michaela and I had very similar reactions to the book as a whole. Because again, I read the book in one sitting next to Michaela, so she got to hear all of me going, and the thing. So
well, this was my second reading of it, so I'm curious about both your opinions.
So yeah, I mean, is that what we're doing now? General opinions? Is that where we are?
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I thought that's what you were transitioning into.
Natural segue.
I was attempting to, very casually segue, but because I can't do anything that isn't awkward, I was in like, oh, is that what we're doing now? Okay. So it took me a while to get into this book because I was like, oh my gosh, why is there so much? And I knew that it was like part autobiography, part writing book. But in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is more autobiography. This is more autobiography. And as I was reading my way through it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about there being so much autobiography on the front. But then when I finally got to the writing stuff, all of a sudden, it was like the writing book that I'd always been looking for when I didn't know what I was looking for, if that makes sense. Like,
sure.
it was writing advice that I believed and that I felt came from someone actually relatable to my, not relatable to my experience because I am not Stephen King, but like relatable in the way that like he's not a literary author, if that makes sense. And like when he talks about writing rules, and there was one part when he was discussing like symbolism, and he was like, "Guys, it's not rocket science," and I was like, "Yes, yes." I was so happy because again, like it's like not another writing book where they're like, the symbol of the blue curtains means blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, stop.
What
Not
if the
everybody
donkey
writes like this.
It's just a donkey.
Right? What if the
To
thing
be fair, it can go both ways.
It can, but what
It
if the
can.
donkey is just a donkey, Taylor?
But anyways, this is a long example of why, like, when I got to the end, I was like, oh, this might be the one writing book besides And the Moth's Bird by Bird that I put it down and I went, oh yeah, like it got me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I liked it, and I've never really done a lot of Stephen King, so that's my non-awkward way of ending my piece.
Right. For me, as Gretchen said earlier, we had similar opinions. I also felt that like the stand that he took and kept emphasizing throughout this book was one, that he's not the best writer and in fact is only a good writer, and that he will never be a great writer, and he accepts that fact, and that most people are not great writers, but it is possible to take a mediocre writer and make them a good writer through these certain tips and tricks that he gives. The second thing was that he constantly was like, in my opinion, putting himself up with people, like fellow writers that people often, I guess, I don't know how to do it. Like, you know those books that gets put in the supermarket aisle that everybody sort of scoffs at, and how there's like romance and then like James Patterson?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King put himself with them. He's like, I'm a popular writer. And like,
Mm-hmm.
as of someone who is a fan of Stephen King, I cannot put him on the same level as James Patterson. And like agree.
At least Stephen King writes his own books.
Right.
Ooh.
Bow, 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 bow. We see you, Jimmy. Fucking Jimmy. So that, in a way, was sort of amusing to me, that he was saying, you know, like, he, not that he didn't recognize his own talent, but that he accepted that his talent was not great and was more.
Well, I think that's a degree of modesty. I think he will say, you know, this is my place in economics, but I think there's a strong case to be made for him being a great writer as opposed to just a good one.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, I think that there's, like, yes, he knows that he's writing about himself, and that's always going to, like, color that, you know what I mean?
He's
like,
a pretty down-to-earth guy, is the...
Yeah. That's what I got throughout the whole book, was just that, like, he might be Stephen King, but at the base of it, he's like, the curtain is just a curtain. Like,
he's just
don't use adverbs. I also really liked when Michaela brought up The Stand. One of my favorite sentences was when he was talking about The Stand, how people were like, this is my best book ever. And he's like, I love when people tell me my best book ever was written 20 years ago. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that's gotta suck. And I mean, like, this was 1999 when he wrote the book, but I was like laughing with him just being like, this is my life now.
So
I didn't hear any of that. I was listening to my aunt talk to me.
Just carry on then.
Okay.
I segued while you were busy.
Oh, okay.
We had a side tangent. Nothing you need to address, though.
Yeah.
Okay. I liked it. I liked the like way that he went about making this book. I guess the persona he took on was what I was trying to say. Of like, modesty, and him saying that he felt like he had something to share because he was successful in this one area of writing and wanting to discuss that, but also saying very much so that, like, I am not a god and do not see me as that. I make mistakes. And that was, like, very appealing to me, like the way that he went about it. His sense of humor and his, you know, personality throughout the book was really endearing to me.
So I enjoyed this at least as much as I did the first time I read it. I don't think I came to it with any like more great realizations about writing. I don't think it was any more poignant, but I've both readings I always latched onto a little more the memoir portion of just finding that so interesting, and in part just the way his own story worked. The part with the van towards the end, you know, we don't really need to get into that, has also always been interesting to me because he incorporated it into one of his books. Don't really need to get into that because I feel like I'm giving spoilers for a very soon part of a book, but
spoilers, the gunslinger saved him.
I like read the fictionalized version of this account, and then I read his memoir version, and it's always been interesting to see how he creates himself as a person, both as a narrator, but then also just this guy going about his life. And he's very self-aware and very critical towards his, you know, difficulties had in his life, and I've just found that so interesting to engage with. So I just really like him as a person and found this to be an engaging, fun read. Poignant as well, definitely. And I also just want to say that I would have loved to see him in a band with, you know, Barbara Kingsolver and Amy Tan.
Right? Oh my god.
Like, that was a hell of a lineup he's got in that first page, first of 3 forwards.
Yeah.
But that band with like every other pop
I think
writer.
we're all also reading. We all read this edition, right?
Yes, the from
yeah,
2000.
this is the anniversary edition. So I think that they were added. Like at least one of those was added.
Yes, because he also has like 3 postscripts as well.
I also wanted, because you just brought this up and it was on my mind, is that I think that people react differently to books about writing based on how not on what they learn, but on how much the writer talking resonates with how we write, if that makes sense. Because like when I read books about writing and they're like, and so when I plot like this, and I'm like, I'm already out of this because I know that I can't plot like that, if that makes sense, right? So you don't engage as much with something when you, I mean, again, I've tried a lot of different techniques. Maybe this is like unique to me, but like I already know that doesn't work for me. And then I'm like, well, sucks to be me, I guess, reading this now. But when he was talking about how he like has a situation or a character and then he lets them talk to him. And I think this is one of the first books I've ever read when he was like, yeah, I don't really plot. I just kind of do the thing. And I was like,
bounce things against each other.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my god, like I've been spending so long reading all these writing books and learning about plot like this and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh, Stephen King writes like me. Whoa! And I mean that alone.
Let's reverse that, Gretchen.
No, Stephen King writes like me. I do not like to write like Stephen King. But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's a lot easier to engage with.
Yeah. So
and
like
it's also really easy to shut down when you're reading all those manuals that break it down to these very impersonal moments instead of like what he did, where he's like, here's how it worked for me. When they're like, you must construct this tapestry, you must see it before you, and only then, when you have outlined all the layers of color and flower petal, then you can begin your stitching. No,
not fun.
That's a little more than I've ever managed to do.
But then again, I know people who need that.
Yeah, but it's a little harder to teach that way, I feel like. Because it's basically saying you must accomplish everything instead of him just saying, just fucking do it. Set a schedule. Even if you don't have an idea, try to do it. And I think not necessarily that is better advice, but it's a lot easier to act upon if you're struggling with that.
And I mean, again, too, I feel like if he had sat down and he was like, so I established this system and this is how I plot my books, like based on the tone and like the trust, and maybe we've come at this backwards, but like based on the trust that I gained from him in the autobiography parts, like if he had then said, so like based on this experience, I went and I learned how to plot my novels like this, I would trust that more than like some person being like, and because I want to connect to my story on a higher plane, or you know what I mean? Like, like you know, that's sometimes how those other ones feel, because it's just like, but why? Why do you do this? Why do you want me to do this? Why? He's just like, just do it. Do it, damn it.
I mean, that has always been his declaration, really. Sit down and write and read. Those are the two things. I think after coming away from this book, those are the two things he says: write and read.
Yeah, do a lot of both. And I think my favorite bit of advice in the book, or the one that sticks with me most outside of the basic tenets that we just discussed, and I think really connects to your point, Gretchen, that you were making there at the end, is like, write your story, and then, you know, once you, I guess these are a multi-part thing that I'm latching onto, is like, you know, put it down for 6 months, forget about it, reread it, and then figure out what your story is about. You know, like, write your fucking story and then say, oh, here are things in it, and now I can start to connect them and make it into something larger, instead of, as I always try to do and get nowhere because, you know, something just sits half finished, is I go the opposite direction. I'm like, I want it to be about this, and then I get nowhere because I'm trying to write a plot, not a story.
And again, I think maybe this is what excited me so much about the book, is because, I mean, having gone through school and like I've got a degree in writing, and it's all about like, well, what do you mean? And like, even when you're just writing an English essay, like, what is your theme? What is your thesis? And so much of my focus for like the past 4 years has been like, I have to be saying a thing. Like, I have to condense what I'm saying down to my thesis statement, you know, and everything I write has to be in servitude of that thesis statement. And that's what they teach as well in like my writing classes, for most of them anyway. It's just like, what are you writing about? And that's always the question. And that stupefies me, because I write like that. I write the story. I have a character, I have a scene, and then I get to the end and I read it over and I go, oh, this is about this. But I've literally never read a book about how to write where they go, you know, that's okay. You know what I mean? It's always about like, what is your theme? What is your blah? And I'm like, I can't do this. It's not how I write.
It's the NaNoWriMo method.
Yeah.
Just right.
And I think, Gretchen, that's because all of those manuals saying, I will teach you how to write, they're all working towards, you know, write the next great American novel. Like, this is how you write the most significant thing to have ever been held by a human. Instead of Stephen King being like, here's how I write books that I have fun writing and people seem to enjoy reading.
So I mean, we should probably, because I keep going back to it, talk about the autobiography part. And again, I already kind of volunteered that, like, in the beginning, I thought that there was too much of it. And I was like, man, this book called On Writing just feels like on Stephen King. And then then after I got to the On Writing part, I was like, wow, I have so much more faith and trust in everything that he's saying. And also, I mean, it is gratifying to read about how somebody who became Stephen King was like working, you know, with laundry and whatever, because he was like, well, I guess this is what's happening now because I have a family and I got to make money somehow, you know? Like, and he was just so forthright about almost giving up. I don't know. I don't even know what it is, and maybe somebody else can articulate it. What it is about him in particular that just makes you trust him?
Well, it's also because it was never just a like sudden success story. He never like struck big even when he did. It's just the memoir portion, the opening is just moment after moment of him slamming his head into walls until they broke.
That's
he got
true.
really good at it. And I think that's what makes it so compelling. It really allows us to engage with this story of a guy who knew what he wanted, had nothing in the world going for him besides just this raw desire to succeed, and he fucking does it through, you know, sheer piss and vinegar.
I mean, yeah. I think the other thing that was interesting about the memoir bit was that he was discussing his evolution as a writer, like growing up, and like his every aspect of the memoir, while simultaneously being, this was me as a young boy, and this was me as a teenager, and this was me as a young adult, and this was me as all of this stuff was also his relationship with his writing at the time. Like, this was me working with my brother on a newspaper, and I would write stories for like the local town folks, and they seemed to like it. And then I worked for my school newspaper, and then I worked for the local newspaper, and like all of those things showed his trajectory and like his relationship with writing and the little tidbits of information that he learned along the way of like the newspaper guy in his local newspaper telling him to like cut out the fat, right? Which is a very newspaper oriented thing in that you want to save space. You try to get your idea across as like punctual. That's the word that's coming out.
And that was echoed later on when he got a draft back saying, you know, good try, not this time. Second draft should be, you know, like 10% less, basically. Just resubmit this, redo this 10% less.
But
and
it
so
was
that same idea. Trim the fat.
But like at the same time, seeing him getting that information and not yet applying it, right? Like he was told this, but it didn't get through his head until later, and he'd been told it repeatedly. And like that's also something that he says, that like sometimes the thing that we need to recognize the most is it just needs to be told to us over and over and over again until we accept it.
Well, and also I thought the one interesting part of reading that was that like I thought that was really going to disconnect me from the book, for the same reason that like I don't write like this. Like I haven't lived like this, right? Like I tried to be the young writer who submitted all these places everywhere, and I just never did it for one reason or another. And I have had like pieces published in magazines because I was doing it for a while, but then I stopped. You know what I mean? And I thought, you know, reading about him continuously submitting and continuously writing, I would be like, oh well, it's already over for me because I haven't exhibited this much drive, and well, I'm screwed, you know. And for some reason, I never. I mean, I did slightly feel that for myself, but like it wasn't in a way where I disengaged from the book.
Yeah.
Like it was in a way that I still recognized his struggle, and I was like, but this could still be me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we always have Toni Morrison as the fallback for, you know, you still have time. You still have time to strike it big. She was 49. She was in her 40s when she was first published.
Colonel Sanders, who was in his 70s when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's the real goal.
Yeah, but that's not a book.
Or is it?
Yeah, I've asked the humor section. You are incorrect.
I like that he bookended it with memoir bits in a way. It was like
kind of accidentally.
Yes, like it wouldn't have been that way if he hadn't been hit by a van. But at the same time,
happy accidents.
Van ex machina.
Made for a great story.
It allowed the, like, I don't know how to say this. What is technically the writing manual, so to speak, in the middle to be, like you said, like, you respect it more and you accept it more, because even as he's, like, writing this manual on how to write books, he discusses in that last memoir bit how he found things out because he was forced to sit and do work in a different way, right? Because he was injured. And, like...
And also just how, like, he wanted to stop.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of the things you would never think of, like, Stephen King, stop writing, what? And then he's just like... Exactly, but, like, I mean, it's, in a weird way, it's still, like, comforting to hear that even Stephen King was like, ow, no. Like, you know what I mean?
He is but a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because especially someone so prolific as him, you're just like, oh, you just, like, write like a machine, dude. And you just keep going. And he's like, actually, no, I am human. I broke, and I didn't necessarily know how to put myself back together again.
And I think I also was drawn to the second memoir, the post-van situation of his life, because it really got into, for me, hammering home what he talks about when he's talking about addiction and all those things. And he's saying, like, how he doesn't even remember writing Cujo. It was just sheer walls of cocaine that was carrying him through years, and he really shouldn't be alive. And this is another situation where, like, you know, close to death, and it's family and writing that kind of brings him back. As that's, like, both a beautiful narrative you would get in your not quite Hallmark movie, but still like a
Stephen King Hallmark movie. I can see it now.
Yeah, like the Oscar bait sort of inspiration tale.
No, Christmas Hallmark movie about Stephen King getting hit by a van. Perfect.
So yes, what I found really that struck me most, and, you know, that I could identify more with, was not necessarily how I approach writing or anything like that, but it's like, you know, this didn't save me, but it makes my life a happier thing. And I know for me, that takes the pressure off. It's like, oh wait, I can just do these things because I enjoy them.
I think that was something too of him talking about, like, not writing, like, if he's not writing, he's not whole in a way.
Yeah.
Of just, like, and again, when he talks about, like, wanting to write fun stuff, wanting to write trash, and, like, because you're right, like, at the end of the day, he's just talking about, like, writing is fun. I enjoy this. Like, I treat it like I have a schedule for it, but it's still fun. And that's something too, where, like, a lot of writing books are like, you must write for the schedule, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, oh my God, doesn't that take the happiness out of it if, like, you treat it like a demand? And he is still just like, and I came back to life because of writing, and I got back into this schedule, and I was like, it's just fun.
Yeah, and it does also make me feel better that he did wrestle with the, well, am I having fun with this? Is the, like, schedule take the fun out of it? So he does talk about it, where he's like, yeah, you know, it is a schedule, but it is, you know, still something to go to enjoy. It shouldn't ever feel like a chore, because then you're doing something fucking wrong, and you should stop that.
The writing itself shouldn't be a chore, but, like, the thing that you are writing shouldn't feel like a chore. But you need to have, because he's definitely, you need to write every day type of person, because it's
but it does belong in your life in a schedule, in a way that a chore is.
Yeah. But when he talks about writing, when he talks about writing every day, though, he talks about writing every day in a way that, like, he doesn't want to go through a day without it, rather than writing every day as, like, oh God, I gotta do the thing. And just like that different reframing and the fact that you believe him when he says, like, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, makes the whole concept different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gretchen, I think you should read some of Laurel K. Hamilton's blog posts, because she's another person who writes the book like day by day and then goes back and fixes it. Like you said that's how you like to write. And while she doesn't have an on writing of her own, she does do blog posts where she talks about her creativity and having like characters that talk to her and things like that. So yeah, that's another one of the authors that I really enjoy. The idea that you need to write the story that you want to read, as opposed to attempting to change lives and write the best American novel. It's not so much about creating the best object ever as it is writing something that you enjoy and that you would want to exist. Seeing a gap in the market, so to speak, of like, I wish this existed. Create that thing.
I mean,
that was actually exactly what Toni Morrison did.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean,
nearly the same language. Yeah, go on, Gretchen. Sorry.
Sorry, no, you keep going. I interrupted you twice.
No. You would. Toni Morrison said that. She was working in publishing till she was in her 40s and said, "This is not a book. I'm going to write that book." And she did.
And then she did.
Well, and I was also thinking too about his insistence that you have to read to write, and like you would think that logically follows, but like as someone who spent 4 years getting a writing degree and sat in classes with people that were like, I want to write mysteries, but I've never read a mystery in my life, and like then you read their short story and you're like, it shows.
You don't understand how mysteries are written because you have not read them.
And people, like, it's like you think that if you've watched a mystery movie, you can write a mystery story. These two, like, the movie medium and the story medium are entirely different. Like, please, no. Please, Taylor and I took a writing class our senior year, and the professor mentioned something about writers of our generation using a lot more paragraph jumps because people want to write stories like the, like, movie or like TV, like, and cut to book. And I was like, that's one of the things that maybe has had one of the most impact on my writing moving forward, because I thought about that and I was like, oh my God, you're right. I use so many paragraph cuts to like move around like I'm like doing cinematic cutscenes, and like that's no, write a story.
Are we setting aside 20 minutes to just trash talk people from writing classes? Because I'm down for that.
No, but I just mean that, like, and I've been talking to my dad
Got a lot of
about this
ammunition.
my dad is trying to write right now, but he's like, well, I don't have time. I only have time to do one thing. I only have time to read or write. And I'm like, then take that time to read, because like if you can't write without reading, and it's a massive pet peeve of mine, and I'll stop. But like, it's a thing. Movies are not substitutes for reading, and you need to read what you want to write. That is all. You can move on now. I'm done.
Especially if you don't realize what makes up the story or what narrative satisfaction does. As some people in that writing class did not know. They just did not know how stories work.
As someone who has never taken a college-level writing class, I can still understand this as an editor to a magazine where both English majors and writing majors submitted. There was an astounding lack of quality in the writing majors.
Michaela, did you take a high school writing course? Did you take a middle school writing course?
Does like English language arts count? Because that's
probably.
We didn't have writing courses at my schools. It was just English class.
So yeah, that anything where you had like creative discussion or looked at other people's works. No, never mind. Well, I was gonna say they're the same all the way down and all the way up.
Turtles all the way down. Reference to the new John Green book coming out this fall. Ladies and gentlemen, Turtles all the way down.
He's taking my favorite joke?
I don't think he's allowed to take your favorite joke, but he's using the same reference that your favorite
He's
joke
appropriating my favorite reference to a point where I'm not going to be able to use it anymore?
Maybe you should read the book before you judge it, friend.
I'm just judging his other work that I've read.
I mean, that's fair, but yeah, this new book took him like 10 years to write or some shit, so.
Is he still trying to deconstruct the Manic Pixie Dream Girl?
No, the protagonist of this is a girl who's struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a thing that he himself struggles with. So it's a discussion of whether or not the self is real when you do not control your thoughts, and if your personality is made up of your thoughts and your memories, but you aren't in control of that, then who is actually real and what isn't. It's very, from what I've heard of him speaking about it, it sounds very interesting and very different from his other stuff. So
sure, I think.
Weird.
You know, I'm a skeptical person. I think we might have to read that through a lens of Stephen King's writing advice of write a story and then ask yourself what it's about. Or are we just slamming plot together until you have the beginning and end of a book?
I don't know. I'm dying slowly.
So in terms of this book,
yeah.
no more turtles.
Oh.
Fine.
Yeah. So, yes. Good writing advice, even though it boiled down to write and read a lot.
Good fucking advice.
Plus some other little tidbits like cut the fat and have a toolbox and things like that. 2. Great memoir as well.
Yeah, really great.
3.
Again,
Fun
like
guy.
Stephen King is hilarious, and I would read anything. Like if he just rewrote classics, I feel like they would be great. Just as
How does a guy who writes so much horror get to also be such a funny?
literally every horror writer I've ever met though has been like the most hilarious person. I went to a writing camp and I was in high school, and one of the writers there was a horror writer, and I was like, oh god, it's gonna be awful. And then like his classes are maybe the most fun I've ever had because he was hilarious.
Do you want to know the secret to that though? Is that humor and horror both involve being able to touch people at a very primitive level?
Well, we can break that down. Humor is out of fear. Like, that's linked to the other. It's not just they're both primal instincts. Like,
I don't think humor is necessarily out of fear, but yeah.
It's linked to fear. Like, that's what they...
Laughing is linked to fear. I don't think humor is linked to fear.
Well, it's all in the idea also that, you know, jokes and humor are a break from, you know, you understand how something is going to be, and then it's the subversion showing, like, that non-expected thing. And I think structurally that's very similar to how we approach horror.
Sure. I think the point I was
yawning at you, I swear to God.
Yes, you were.
I think the point I was trying to make is that in order to create fear in a person and in order to create joy in a person, people use the same tactics, and they are both used in horror and humor, right? They go down to key emotions, and that's why the people who have to be able to be in touch with something that is innately terrifying must also be able to touch on something that's innately joyful. Otherwise, it's just
The
sad.
unexpected.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that this book, like, it's not gonna like make you see writing in a whole new light. Like, you know what I mean? It's not gonna like. What I mean, but like if you have read like a lot of other like how to write stuff, like it's not gonna like wow you. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of the things that he says. I've heard before, but he says them in a way where they impact me more because I believe him, and I believe that like when he says them that they'll actually work, like the planning thing and like writing every day, like he frames them in such a way where I go, oh, it's not as clinical as I've always like felt this to be, and so I resist it less. Like when he's giving me writing advice, I feel like he is a friend who has stopped by, whom I like respect and trust very much, and he's like, well, I write like this, and maybe this will work for you, as opposed to like, and here at step 37, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I read a lot of writing books.
We've been agreeing about this the whole episode, Gretchen. I know what you're talking about.
I actually don't believe that we ever agree on anything, so I'm confused and therefore have to restate my point several thousand times.
You're like, no. This is what I said. You need. Now's when you say no.
Eventually, you'll disagree with me if I keep using different words.
You think if I agree, you haven't made your point. I understand.
Yes. I know, it's been 4 years of this. I know how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are my closing thoughts as well.
So do we want to talk about next month?
Next month, yes, we do.
Because Taylor, I already got you.
He's gone.
Oh, bye, Taylor. Bye.
I wanted my copy.
Okay, well, mine's good too.
It's my book.
Okay, fine. You want to tell us all about it?
Next month, we're going to be reading Dead Mountain by Donnie Eicher. And this is the untold true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, which was a weird, like, unsolved mystery out of Cold War Russia that was, and still sort of has been, unsolved for decades, and it's weird and creepy, and I was interested in it, and I read this book, and it's really cool.
I'd also like to mention that it's
I read it early.
One of the only pick of Taylor's, maybe, that is not bigger than at least two of my fingers. If you see this, and it has pictures. So
Yes.
I'm not supposed to tell Taylor this, so we'll pretend he's not listening, and I'm also excited for this. So, you know, I just...
I did also want to say, I read this after choosing it, and I read it before reading On Writing just because I couldn't wait, so I'm a bit spoiled on it. But we're not going back to something I read years ago.
Nice. We will also be announcing at the end of the Dead Mountain, I almost said podcast, at the end of the Dead Mountain episode, the winners of our Summer Reads giveaway. So if you don't know what that is, then you can go ahead and check out the YouTube channel. But Michaela and I are currently holding a giveaway for some Summer Reads, and we'll be announcing the two winners at the end of that episode, so you should at least check in for like the last 5 minutes to see if you won things if you enter.
That should be very fun and exciting.
Okay.
Do you want to cough a couple times as a closing statement, Michaela?
Oh my god. No.
All right.
I don't have anything new to shout out. Gretchen pretty much did all that. The round of books after this last nonfiction book is another one of our like reader's choice. So we've all picked books that we're just interested in. There's no particular theme. The choice after that, we want to do another theme, but I have not picked a particular theme, I don't believe. Correct? We haven't picked a theme for the one.
We have not decided on anything.
So if anybody has any suggestions for a theme that they would like us to read, I would be open to hearing that, whether it's something like authors of color or LGBTQ plus books, or all in a particular genre, or all with a particular colored spine. I don't care what your suggestion is. Just throw it at us in the comments as well.
Let's do green books.
Green books.
Green books.
Yeah, that's like green and yellow, I feel like would be the least used.
All right.
All right. Well, we can think about it.
Yeah.
Also, Fangirl is green book, I realize.
This is really just to get us to read Fangirl again. All right. See you guys later.
Bye.